Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for this weekend edition of Hebrew Word Study. And as you remember, we are going through the book of Matthew from a Hebrew text that is called the Harley text in Hebrew. And so we did verse 1 last 2 times, kind of split it up, and now we come to verse 2. And so I just thought to reminisce, show you what it looks like in the King James Version. And verse 2 just says, "And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying." I don't know if anything stands out to you about this, but it has a redundancy to it. Why is it necessary to say that he opened his mouth? Isn't that pretty normal? I mean, isn't that totally understood that if you're going to teach, you're going to open your mouth? That part of could be left out. And disciples came to him and he taught them. And so those words are extra. So whenever you come across that in the scriptures, that should always, at least for me, I think it should be a prompting for us to take a deeper look. And thankfully, the Hebrew really helps us. I like to use the word unpack. And someone had mentioned that in a class I was studying with just this past week, how they had heard the parable that Hebrew words are like a stuffed suitcase, and it's just stuffed and overflowing. And when you open the suitcase, you unpack them and you find the treasures that are hidden within. And so I hope you can see that as we go through just this little simple verse that in English, how many times we have read this and just passed over it, and it had virtually no impact or no meaning to us. Let's see if the Hebrew can change a little bit of that. First of all, we notice that it's Vayiftach is the word for "and he opened." I put the the parsing of the verb here. It's imperfect with the vav consecutive, pretty standard Hebrew, not anything that jumps out just from the usage of the word. But the ending of it being in a third person masculine singular, notice that this form is only used 12 times in the biblical Hebrew. And so I wanted to just show you a couple of interesting, what I find is when this word is used minimal amount of times, less than 20 or 30, what are the nuances in that word, and why is this word chosen to convey? Is it chosen to convey a message about what's about to happen? So when I open up this usage here of Vayiftach, we see it was used when Noah opened the window. The ark was open. The First the raven, then the um, dove went out, but something was coming out of the ark. You can draw lots of parallels between the ark and what was in it, and the ark saving the world. Lots of metaphors there. Here it's used in opening of the womb of Rachel. And so new life was bringing forth, the child was coming forth. Again, you see how these kind of tie together here. Joseph opened the storehouses. This word was used when he opened the storehouses of grain and fed all of the people. Opening his sack further on in the Joseph story, when the sack of grain was opened. Again, something coming out of this opening that was providing provision. Here, Numbers, the Lord opened the mouth. Again, very interesting. Doors were opened. So just a lot of interesting things opening the book. So what does that do? Because why was this mentioned? Thinking of who is speaking here, and that it was going to be such a profound utterance that would come out, that every step of what was happening was described, that he opened his mouth. So I hope that builds a little bit of anticipation. It kind of gives you a feeling for what's happening. It increases for me the emotion context of it. And that's what Hebrew is. It's an emotional language, not scientific, not medical. It is a emotional language. And so learning these things help us feel what was going on during that time. First, what did Jesus feel? And then what did the people feel? What was the mood like when they were there and they were all sitting around him? He was sitting and waiting for him, hanging on his every word, as we sometimes use that expression, so much that they noticed when he opened his mouth and that something was going to come out of it, that they wanted to hear every sound, every syllable. And so, it has a direct object marker here. Again, the focus is that his mouth. Interesting. Why would they need a direct object marker? Very common used through Hebrew. Again, it's lost in the translation into English. And but here it tells us that the focus was on his lips, on his mouth being an opening. And it wasn't just because of the physical feature of being pleasing to look at, it was because of what was going to come out of them and the utterance that was going to come out. Um, the next word here is 3925 is Vailamed, and it is the word for he taught. Now, this is interesting because it's in a PL form. Again, Hebrew has moods, has feelings behind it. Intensity can be implied of what the intensity was by the markings that are on this word. And again, you wouldn't catch that from the English because how can taught in English tell you anything about how he was teaching? It doesn't tell you if he was raising his voice. Was he standing on the desk? Was he, pounding on the pulpit? Was he screaming? Was he talking soft? Was he talking in an accent? Or, all these things that people use of means to communicate that we are aware of when we hear it. But to try to catch that in a written form takes a lot of words in English, but here in Hebrew, it's just a simple understanding of the vowel pointing tells us that this is an PL form. It's an intensive. It means that when he opened his mouth, maybe you could see his eyes squint. Maybe you could see his hands tense up. Maybe he had his hands outreached towards them. But there was an emotion that was caught by those there, that these were not just, he wasn't just reading off a teleprompter. He wasn't opening up his notes and reading off of a set of notes. This was coming from the heart with an intensity behind it that just captivated them, that held them spellbound, if you want to use that word, as they're listening. And then, of course, we have the next word, otam, which is translated as them, but it's also a direct object marker. It's, again, pointing towards who the focus was as he taught. Who was the focus upon? We have the direct object marker on his mouth, and now we have the direct object marker on the crowd. And so it's going from mouth to crowd. Just beautiful how Hebrew can put that together. And then what's also interesting here is the vocal, sorry, the verb markings, the vowel markings, as I want to say, is different. There is a patach underneath the tav, which would signify a short A sound, but normally it would have a comets underneath it, which looks like a little symbol T, which is the long sound. And so, again, this is different. I have no explanation why it's not there unless it's more of a dialect type of understanding. I've seen this a lot in the Matthew Hartley, that vowels that are supposed to be a comets are written with a patach. And so I just wanted to note it there for those of you who are following along and may try to look this word up and find that you won't find a similar reference in the Hebrew Bible with that same vowel marking. And then we get to the last word saying lemor. Again, translated as saying, but there is a lamed preposition in the front, which means to or for, and then the word is amar, which are words that are, again, are different than the word davar, which are thought to be words from the heart. And so I find it interesting that when you have the PL form of the lamayid of to teaching, the words that are coming out are put in a Amar form, which are more of a lighter, not so deep speech. At least that's the generality. Although you will find instances where that's not the case. So again, here we see this little different nuance. He still said the words. We'll find out later, and we'll watch as we go through whether the word Amar is used when Jesus is giving his sermon, or whether Devar comes out in some instances to indicate even a little bit deeper meanings to these words that he's speaking. So, again, a long explanation for a very short verse that I've skipped over, and maybe you have many times before. But again, trying to show you the beauty of the Hebrew, that even a verse that is seemingly insignificant can be unpacked and help us to understand the mood of what's going on there. And I hope that you stay on the edge of your seats and wait for the next words that are going to come out in verse 3. And again, I thank you so much as you see the video come up. If you want to click a like on it, or a subscribe if you're not a subscriber, or pass it on to someone who you think might be blessed by it, I truly appreciate it. God bless you all. Bye-bye.